David Matthews was a man at a crossroads. With a family to support and bills mounting, he found himself grappling with a decision that would test his integrity to the core. Little did he know that a simple act of kindness, sparked by a chance encounter in a local park, would set in motion a chain of events that would change the trajectory of his life and the lives of those around him. What will he choose? And how will his decision ripple out, touching the lives of strangers and loved ones alike? Join us as we uncover the story of a desperate father who stumbles upon a lost lottery ticket, unaware that it holds the power to transform not just his own future, but the very fabric of his community. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from today. And if this tale of integrity, resilience, and the true meaning of wealth resonates with you, be sure to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. David Matthews stared at the blinking cursor on his computer screen, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and worry. Another rejection email glared back at him, the words, "We regret to inform you," burning into his retinas. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair, the weight of unemployment pressing down on his shoulders like a lead blanket. At 38, David had never imagined he'd be in this position. He'd always been the dependable one, the rock his family could lean on. But now, 6 months after being laid off from his job of 15 years, he felt like anything but solid ground. The sound of childish laughter drifted in from the backyard, momentarily lifting the gloom that had settled over him. His 2 children, Emma, 8, and Jack, 6, were blissfully unaware of the storm clouds gathering over their family. David envied their innocence, wishing he could shield them from the harsh realities of adult life forever. A gentle knock on the door frame pulled him from his reverie. Sarah, his wife of 10 years, stood there, concern etched across her face. "Any luck today?" she asked softly, though they both knew the answer. David shook his head, closing the laptop with a defeated click. Nothing, not even a courtesy interview. Sarah crossed the room, wrapping her arms around his shoulders from behind. "It'll happen, Dave. Something's bound to come through soon." He wanted to believe her, to draw strength from her unwavering optimism. But the stack of overdue bills on the desk told a different story. Their savings had dwindled to almost nothing, and the mortgage payment was due in less than a week. The threat of eviction loomed large, a specter haunting their every waking moment. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," David muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're running out of time and options." Sarah's grip tightened, her voice wavering slightly as she spoke. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But even her reassurances felt hollow now. The strain of their financial situation had begun to seep into every aspect of their lives, creating a tension that crackled between them like static electricity. Later that evening, after the kids were tucked in bed, David found himself pacing the living room. The walls seemed to close in around him, each step a reminder of how trapped he felt. Sarah sat on the couch, sorting through a pile of unopened mail, her face growing more pinched with each envelope she opened. "David," she called, her voice tight. "The bank sent another notice. If we don't make a payment by next Friday, they're starting foreclosure proceedings." The words hit him like a physical blow. David sank into the armchair, his head in his hands. "What are we going to do?" he asked, more to himself than to Sarah. She set the letters aside, moving to kneel in front of him. "We'll figure something out. Maybe we could ask my parents for a loan?" David's head snapped up, a flash of anger and shame coursing through him. "No, absolutely not. I can't. I won't go begging to your family." "It's not begging, Dave," Sarah pleaded. "They love us. They want to help. And what happens when we can't pay them back?" David shot back, his voice rising. "No, we're not dragging anyone else into this mess." Sarah recoiled slightly at his tone, hurt flashing across her face. "Then what do you suggest? Because unless you've got a better idea, we're out of options." The silence that followed was deafening. David stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket from the hook by the door. "I need some air," he muttered, not meeting Sarah's gaze as he stormed out. The cool night air did little to calm the storm raging inside him. David walked aimlessly, his mind racing with increasingly desperate scenarios. He passed a check-cashing store, its neon sign a beacon of temptation. For a brief, terrifying moment, he considered walking in, taking out one of those predatory payday loans. It would buy them some time, at least. But the thought of the crushing interest rates, of potentially digging them into an even deeper hole, made his stomach churn. He walked on, shame burning in his chest at having even considered it. As he cut through the local park, a fleeting, even darker thought crossed his mind. There was a convenience store just on the other side, its night clerk usually dozing behind the counter. With a mask and a convincing enough threat, David shook his head violently, horrified at where his mind had gone. He wasn't a criminal, he told himself firmly. He wouldn't become one, no matter how dire things got. Lost in his turbulent thoughts, he almost missed the small, crumpled piece of paper lying in his path. It was only when his foot brushed against it that he looked down, noticing the distinctive red and white pattern of a lottery ticket. Without really thinking about it, David bent down and picked it up. It was wrinkled and slightly damp from the evening dew, but still intact. He smoothed it out, squinting at the numbers in the dim light of a nearby street lamp. For a brief moment, a wild hope surged through him. What if this was the answer to all their problems? But reality quickly reasserted itself. The odds of this being a winning ticket were astronomical. And even if it was, he hadn't bought it. It wasn't his to claim. Still, he couldn't bring himself to just toss it away. Instead, he carefully folded the ticket and slipped it into his pocket. It was a thin tendril of hope, but right now, he'd take whatever he could get. By the time David made it back home, the house was dark and quiet. He found Sarah curled up on the couch, pretending to be asleep. The sight of her there, worry lines etched into her face even in repose, made his heart ache. Gently, he draped a blanket over her, then sank down onto the floor beside the couch. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing she was awake to hear it. "I shouldn't have snapped at you earlier. You're right. We need to consider all our options." Sarah's eyes fluttered open, a sad smile touching her lips. "I'm scared, Dave," she admitted softly. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." David reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know. I'm scared too. But we'll figure this out together, okay? I promise." He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket, pulling out the folded lottery ticket. "Here," he said, holding it out to her with a wry smile. "I found this in the park. Maybe it's our ticket out of this mess." Sarah took it, raising an eyebrow as she examined the crumpled paper. "A lottery ticket? Really, Dave?" He shrugged, a hint of his old humor shining through. "Hey, stranger things have happened, right? We could be millionaires by morning." Sarah laughed, the sound warming David's heart. It had been too long since he'd heard that sound. "Well, I suppose it can't hurt to dream a little," she said, setting the ticket on the coffee table. "We can check the numbers in the morning." David nodded, pulling himself up onto the couch and gathering Sarah into his arms. As they sat there in the darkness, he felt a tiny spark of hope flickering to life in his chest. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to turn things around. And for now, that would have to be enough. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the melancholy that had settled over the Matthews household. David woke early, the weight of their financial troubles pressing down on him even before he opened his eyes. He found Sarah already in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and poring over the classified ads in the local paper. She looked up as he entered, offering a tired smile. "Morning," she said softly. "I thought I'd get an early start, see if there are any job listings we might have missed." David nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee and joining her at the table. "Anything promising?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah shook her head, pushing the paper aside with a sigh. "Nothing we haven't already tried. But we can't give up, right?" "Right," David agreed, though the word felt hollow in his mouth. He reached across the table, taking Sarah's hand in his. "Listen, about last night, I've been thinking, maybe we should consider talking to your parents, just to see if they might be able to help us out temporarily." The relief that washed over Sarah's face made David's chest tighten with guilt. He should have agreed to this weeks ago, he realized. His pride had only made things worse. "Thank you," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "I know it's not ideal, but they love us. They want to help if they can." David nodded, forcing a smile. "We'll give them a call later today." But first, he glanced over at the coffee table where the forgotten lottery ticket still lay. What do you say we check those numbers? You never know, right? Sarah laughed, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. Sure, why not? It's about time we had some good luck around here. As David reached for his phone to look up the winning numbers, the patter of little feet announced the arrival of their children. Emma bounded into the kitchen, her pigtails flying, closely followed by a sleepy-eyed Jack. "Daddy!" Emma cried, launching herself into David's arms. "Are you home all day again?" David hugged her tight, pushing down the pang of guilt her innocent question provoked. "That's right, sweetie. Daddy's going to be home today." Jack climbed into Sarah's lap, rubbing his eyes. "Can we have pancakes?" he asked hopefully. Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair. "I think we can manage that. Why don't you two go wash up while Daddy and I check something quickly?" As the kids scampered off, David pulled up the lottery website on his phone. "All right," he said, trying to inject some excitement into his voice. "Let's see what we've got here." Sarah unfolded the ticket, smoothing it out on the table between them. "Okay, the numbers are 7, 15, 22, 36, 41, and the Powerball is 10. David's fingers hovered over his phone screen, a sudden nervousness gripping him. It was silly, he knew. The chances of this random ticket being a winner were astronomical. And yet, "Here goes nothing," he muttered, tapping the screen to reveal the winning numbers. For a moment, neither of them spoke, their eyes darting between the ticket and the phone screen. Then, slowly, incredulously, Sarah began to laugh. "Oh my God," she gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "David, David, look!" He was already staring, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The numbers on the screen matched perfectly with those on the ticket. Every single one. This can't be real," David whispered, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Sarah, if this is right, we just won the jackpot." Sarah's laughter turned hysterical, tears springing to her eyes. "We won? We actually won?" David nodded, a giddy smile spreading across his face. "We won. Sarah, we're millionaires." They fell in each other's arms, laughing and crying in equal measure. The weight of their financial troubles seemed to evaporate in an instant, replaced by a dizzying sense of possibility. "Mom? Dad?" Emma's voice cut through their celebration. She and Jack stood in the doorway, looking confused. "What's going on?" David and Sarah exchanged a look, both suddenly unsure how to explain this miraculous turn of events to their children. "Well," David began, his voice shaky with emotion. "Remember that ticket we found last night? It turns out it's very special. It's going to help us solve all our problems." "Really?" Jack asked, his eyes wide. "Does that mean we can keep our house?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetie, we can keep our house. And so much more." As the reality of their situation began to sink in, David felt a twinge of unease. The ticket hadn't been his to begin with. Someone out there had lost it, unaware that they'd just missed out on a life-changing amount of money. But as he looked at his family, at Sarah's relieved smile, at the excitement shining in his children's eyes, he pushed the thought aside. They needed this. After everything they'd been through, didn't they deserve a little miracle? "Come here, you two," he said, opening his arms wide. Emma and Jack rushed into the group hug, giggling as David lifted them both off the ground. "Who wants celebratory pancakes?" As the kitchen filled with the sounds of laughter and the sweet smell of pancakes, David allowed himself to believe that everything would be okay. They had been given a second chance, a way out of the nightmare they'd been living, and he was determined to make the most of it. Little did he know, the true test of his character was just beginning. As the morning wore on and the initial euphoria began to fade, David found the feeling of unease growing stronger. By the time he'd seen the kids off to school and settled down with Sarah to discuss their next steps, it had blossomed into a full-fledged moral dilemma. "Sarah," he began hesitantly, "I need to talk to you about something." She looked up from the notepad where she'd been jotting down ideas for their newfound wealth, her brow furrowing at his serious tone. "What is it, Dave? Is everything okay?" He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. "It's about the ticket. I'm not sure we should keep it." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" "David, this is our chance. Our miracle. Why wouldn't we keep it? Because it's not ours, he said softly, the words heavy on his tongue. I found it in the park, remember? Someone else bought that ticket. Someone else lost it. And now they've lost out on millions of dollars. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face, followed quickly by a mix of emotions: disappointment, frustration, and a reluctant admiration for her husband's integrity. Oh, David, she sighed, setting down her pen. I see what you're saying, but do we really have to think about that right now? David ran a hand through his hair, his internal conflict evident in every line of his face. I can't help it, Sarah. It's eating away at me. How would we feel if we were the ones who lost that ticket? If we found out later that someone else had cashed it in? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the crumpled ticket that lay between them on the table. When she spoke, her voice was soft, tinged with a reluctance that mirrored David's own. You understand? Ido. But David, think about what this money could mean for us. For the kids. We're on the brink of losing everything. This could save us. I know, David replied, his voice strained. Believe me, I know. I want nothing more than to cash in this ticket and solve all our problems. But at what cost? Could we really live with ourselves knowing we'd essentially stolen this money? Sarah's eyes flashed with a sudden spark of anger. Stolen? David, you found that ticket on the ground. If you hadn't picked it up, it probably would have been swept away or thrown in the trash. How is that stealing? Because we know it's not ours, David insisted. We know someone else is out there, probably tearing their house apart looking for this ticket. How can we in good conscience keep it? The tension in the room was palpable as they stared at each other across the table. Sarah's shoulders slumped, the fight going out of her. So what are you suggesting? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That we just give it back? Throw away our one chance at financial security? David shook his head, his mind racing. Not necessarily. Maybe we could try to find the original owner. Put up some flyers, check with the stores that sell lottery tickets in the area. If we can't find them after a certain amount of time, then maybe we could consider keeping it. Sarah's laugh was hollow, tinged with disbelief. And what if we do find them? We just hand over millions of dollars to a stranger while we go back to worrying about how we're going to keep a roof over our heads. The harsh reality of their situation hung heavy in the air between them. David felt torn, pulled in two directions by his desire to do the right thing and his desperate need to provide for his family. I don't know, he admitted, his voice cracking. I don't have all the answers, Sarah. I just know that I can't ignore this feeling. I can't pretend that we have a right to this money when we know we don't. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need some air, she said, her voice tight with emotion. I can't think about this right now. As she walked out of the kitchen, David called after her. Sarah, please. We need to talk about this. She paused in the doorway, her back to him. I know, she said softly. Just give me some time, okay? This is a lot to process. David nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Of course. Take all the time you need. As the sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, David slumped in his chair, the weight of his moral dilemma pressing down on him. He stared at the lottery ticket, this small piece of paper that held the power to change their lives forever. It represented everything they'd ever dreamed of: financial security, a better future for their children, an end to the constant stress and worry that had plagued them for so long. And yet, it also represented a choice between taking the easy path, the one that would solve all their problems in an instant, and the harder road of integrity and moral responsibility. David knew which path he wanted to take, but he also knew the cost. It wasn't just his decision to make. This affected his entire family, and he couldn't ignore Sarah's perspective. As he sat there, lost in thought, memories of their struggles over the past months flashed through his mind. The embarrassment of having to borrow money from friends to pay for groceries. The heart-wrenching conversation with Emma, explaining why they couldn't afford to send her to soccer camp this year. The constant arguments with Sarah over bills, each of them frayed and exhausted from the stress of their financial situation. The temptation to keep the ticket, to embrace this stroke of luck and never look back, was almost overwhelming. It would be so easy to justify. After all, he had found the ticket. If he hadn't picked it up, it likely would have been lost forever. Wasn't it better that the money go to a family in need rather than being unclaimed? But even as these rationalizations ran through his mind, David knew he couldn't silence the voice of his conscience. The fact remained that the ticket wasn't his. Someone out there had bought it, had dreamed of winning just as he had. Could he really deprive that person of their rightful winnings, just because fortune had smiled on him instead? The sound of the front door opening jolted David from his thoughts. Sarah walked back into the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed, but her expression resolute. "Okay," she said, sitting back down across from him. "Let's talk about this." David reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'm sorry," he began. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Believe me, I wish it were simpler." Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. "I know, and I understand where you're coming from. I do. It's one of the things I've always loved about you, your integrity. But David, we have to think about our family, about our future." "I am thinking about our family," David insisted. "I'm thinking about the kind of example we want to set for our kids. Do we want to teach them that it's okay to take something that doesn't belong to you as long as you really need it?" Sarah sighed, running her free hand through her hair. "When you put it like that, no, of course not. But this isn't just about moral philosophy, David. This is real life. We're talking about millions of dollars. Money that could change everything for us." David nodded, acknowledging the weight of her words. "I know. Believe me, I know how much we need this. But I can't shake the feeling that if we keep this money, knowing it's not rightfully ours, it would change us. We'd always be looking over our shoulders, wondering if today's the day the real owner shows up. Could we really enjoy our new life knowing it was built on someone else's loss?" They sat in silence for a long moment, the ticking of the kitchen clock suddenly loud in the quiet room. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice soft but steady. "So what do you propose we do?" David took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "I think we should try to find the original owner. We can put up flyers, check with local stores that sell lottery tickets. And if we can't find the owner by then, well, maybe then we can reconsider." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "And if we do find the owner, what then?" "Then we give them the ticket," David said, his voice firm despite the pain the words caused him. "It's the right thing to do." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her internal struggle visible on her face. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, we'll do it your way. But David, promise me something." "Anything," he replied, relieved that she was agreeing to his plan. "Promise me that if we don't find the owner, if we end up keeping this money, you won't let guilt eat away at you. Promise me you'll let us enjoy it, that you'll let it be the blessing it could be for our family." David nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah stood up, coming around the table to wrap her arms around him. "I love you," she whispered into his ear, "even when you're being infuriatingly noble." David chuckled, pulling her close. "I love you too. Thank you for understanding." As they held each other, the weight of their decision settling over them, David felt a mix of emotions swirling in his chest. There was disappointment, yes, at the possibility of losing this miraculous windfall. But there was also pride. Pride in his wife for her strength and understanding. Pride in himself for choosing the path of integrity despite the temptation to do otherwise. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of regret, of wondering, what if? But as he held Sarah in his arms, David felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever happened, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that, he realized, was worth more than any lottery jackpot. As they pulled apart, Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek, a small smile playing on her lips. "So," she said, her voice stronger now, "how do we start this search?" David stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Well, first things first, we need to make a plan. We should probably start by retracing my steps from last night. See if we can narrow down where I might have found the ticket." Sarah nodded, her practical nature taking over. "Good idea. And we should check with the lottery office, see if anyone's reported a lost ticket. Maybe put an ad in the local paper?" "All good suggestions," David agreed. "We'll need to be careful, though, not to give away too much information. We don't want someone trying to claim the ticket fraudulently. As they began to brainstorm ideas, the initial tension in the room gradually dissipated, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. Despite the potential loss of their newfound wealth, David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They were doing the right thing, and somehow that made him feel richer than any amount of money ever could. The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when David Matthews set out on his mission. With a determined stride, he retraced his steps from that fateful night, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of the lottery ticket in his pocket felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of the life-changing decision that lay before him. As he approached the park where he'd found the ticket, David took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. He'd prepared a stack of flyers, carefully worded to ask about a lost lottery ticket without revealing its true value. With each step, he reminded himself of the promise he'd made to Sarah, to give this search his all before making any final decisions. The park was quiet at this early hour, save for a few joggers and dog walkers. David approached an elderly woman walking a small terrier, clearing his throat nervously. "Excuse me, ma'am," he began. "I was wondering if you might be able to help me. I'm looking for someone who might have lost something valuable in this park recently. Have you noticed anyone searching around here in the past few days?" The woman peered at him over her glasses, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Lost something valuable, you say? What kind of valuable thing are we talking about here?" David hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Well, it's a lottery ticket. I found one, and I'm trying to locate its rightful owner." The woman's eyes widened, a spark of interest igniting in them. "A lottery ticket, you say? Well, now, that is interesting. You know, I buy a ticket every week. Never won more than a few dollars, mind you, but I keep hoping. You don't suppose it could be mine, do you?" For a moment, David's heart leaped. Could it be this easy? But as he looked at the hopeful expression on the woman's face, he felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said gently, "but this ticket was purchased recently. You said you buy yours weekly?" The woman's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Yes, every Saturday without fail. Been doing it for years now. Oh well, I suppose it wasn't meant to be. But good on you, young man, for trying to find the owner. Not many would do that these days." As she walked away, David felt a mix of relief and disappointment. He hadn't really expected to find the owner so quickly, but part of him had hoped for an easy resolution. Shaking off the feeling, he continued his search, approaching anyone who would listen. As the morning wore on, David encountered a diverse cast of characters, each with their own story to tell. There was the harried-looking mother juggling a stroller and two rambunctious toddlers, who laughed bitterly when David mentioned a lost lottery ticket. "Lost lottery ticket? I wish that was my biggest problem," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Try lost job, lost health care, and a mountain of medical bills. Now that's a real loss." David felt a lump form in his throat as he watched her struggle to keep her children in line. The money from the ticket could change her life, give her children the security they deserved. For a moment, he was tempted to tell her about the ticket's true value, to offer her a share. But he held back, reminding himself of his mission. Next, he met a young man in a threadbare suit, clutching a portfolio and looking nervous. When David approached him, the man's eyes lit up with a desperate hope. "A lottery ticket? Yes, I think I might have lost one," he stammered, his hands shaking slightly. "I've been looking everywhere for it. It's very important." David's heart raced. Could this be the rightful owner? But as he pressed for details, the man's story began to unravel. He couldn't remember where he'd bought the ticket, or even what day. His desperation was palpable, and David realized with a sinking feeling that the man was simply grasping at straws, hoping for a miracle to save him from whatever troubles plagued him. "I'm sorry," David said softly, "but I don't think this is your ticket. I hope things get better for you soon." The man's shoulders slumped, the brief flicker of hope extinguished. "Yeah, thanks anyway," he muttered, shuffling away. As the day wore on, David's search led him to various shops and convenience stores in the area. He spoke with clerks and store owners, describing the ticket and asking if anyone remembered selling a winning ticket recently. But each conversation ended the same way, with sympathetic shrugs and apologetic head shakes. By mid-afternoon, David was feeling discouraged. He'd handed out dozens of flyers, spoken to countless people, and was no closer to finding the ticket's owner than when he'd started. As he sat on a park bench, taking a moment to rest and gather his thoughts, a gruff voice startled him. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." David looked up to see a disheveled man standing before him. His clothes were worn and patched, his beard unkempt, but his eyes were sharp and kind. David recognized him as one of the local homeless men who frequented the park. "Mind if I sit?" the man asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. David nodded, shifting over slightly. "Be my guest." The man lowered himself onto the bench with a soft groan. "Name's Frank," he said, extending a calloused hand. "David," he replied, shaking Frank's hand. "And you're not far off. I am carrying quite a weight at the moment." Frank nodded sagely. "I've been watching you all day, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. You're looking for something, aren't you?" David hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a chance. "Actually, I'm looking for someone. The owner of a lottery ticket I found." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "A lottery ticket? Must be some ticket for you to go to all this trouble." "It is," David admitted. It's worth a lot of money. Life-changing money." Frank whistled low. "And you're trying to give it back? Now that's something you don't see every day." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing anymore. My family, we really need this money. And seeing all these people today, hearing their stories, I can't help but think how much good this money could do." Frank was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "Let me tell you something, David. I wasn't always like this, living on the streets. I had a good job once, a family. But I made some bad choices, took some shortcuts I shouldn't have. And it cost me everything." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "The thing is, it's not about the money. It's about who you are when no one's looking. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." David felt those words resonate deep within him. "But what if doing the right thing means my family suffers?" he asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him. Frank turned to look at him, his gaze piercing. "Your family will suffer more if they lose respect for you, or if you lose respect for yourself. Trust me on that." As Frank's words sank in, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. He stood up, offering his hand to Frank once more. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I think I needed to hear that." Frank shook his hand, a small smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good luck, David. Whatever you decide, make sure it's something you can live with." As David walked away, his mind was clearer than it had been in days. He knew the search wouldn't be easy, but he was more determined than ever to see it through. The days that followed David's encounter with Frank in the park were a whirlwind of activity. Every morning, he would wake up at the crack of dawn, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. He'd kiss Sarah and the kids goodbye, promising them that he was one step closer to finding the ticket's rightful owner. Though Sarah's eyes often held a mix of admiration and concern, she supported his decision wholeheartedly. David's search took him to every corner of their small town. He plastered flyers on telephone poles, shop windows, and community bulletin boards. He spoke with everyone from baristas to bus drivers, hoping that someone might have a lead. Each day ended with David returning home, exhausted but determined, to the warm embraces of his family. As the week drew to a close, David found himself standing outside a small, rundown apartment building on the outskirts of town. He'd followed up on countless dead ends and false leads, but something about this one felt different. An elderly neighbor had mentioned seeing a woman crying over a lost lottery ticket a few days before David found it. With a deep breath, David climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor. The hallway was dimly lit, the wallpaper peeling in places. He stopped in front of apartment 3C, his heart pounding in his chest. This could be it, he thought. The moment of truth. He knocked gently on the door, hearing shuffling footsteps approach from the other side. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a petite, silver-haired woman. Her face was lined with age and worry, but her eyes were kind and curious. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft and slightly quavering. David cleared his throat nervously. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is David Matthews. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for someone who might have lost something valuable recently. A lottery ticket, to be specific. The woman's eyes widened, a trembling hand rising to cover her mouth. Oh my, she whispered. Oh my goodness. You found it? David's heart leaped. Could it be? After all this time? I may have, yes. Can you tell me about the ticket you lost? When and where did you buy it? The woman's eyes filled with tears. I didn't buy it. It was a gift, you see, from my Harold. He used to buy us a ticket every week, said it was our chance at a dream. Even after he passed, I kept up the tradition. It was my way of keeping him close. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. I must have dropped it on my way home from the corner store. I didn't even realize it was missing until a few days later. I've been sick with worry ever since. David felt a lump forming in his throat. This was it. This was the owner he'd been searching for. May I ask your name, ma'am? Thompson, she replied. Edna Thompson. But please, call me Edna. David nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. Mrs. Thompson, Edna, I believe I have something that belongs to you. With trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled lottery ticket. Edna's eyes locked onto it, a soft gasp escaping her lips. Oh, Harold, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. You're still looking out for me, aren't you? David held out the ticket. I found this in the park last week. I've been trying to find its owner ever since. I believe it's yours, Edna. Edna reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against the paper as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. You've been looking for me all this time? She asked, her voice filled with wonder. But why? You could have kept it for yourself. No one would have known. David smiled softly. I would have known, and I couldn't live with myself if I kept something that wasn't rightfully mine, especially not something this important. Tears spilled down Edna's cheeks as she took the ticket, clutching it to her chest. Young man, I don't know how to thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. It's not just about the money, you know. It's a piece of Harold, a last gift from him. David felt his own eyes growing misty. I'm just glad I could return it to you, Edna. It's where it belongs. Edna looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and something else, determination. Please, won't you come in? I think we have a lot to talk about. David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He followed Edna into her small apartment, taking in the faded furniture and the walls covered with old photographs. Despite its shabby appearance, the place radiated warmth and love. Edna settled into an armchair, gesturing for David to take a seat on the worn sofa across from her. Now then, she said, her voice stronger than before. Tell me about yourself, David. Why were you in the park that night? David took a deep breath, then began to tell Edna his story. He spoke of losing his job, of the mounting bills, and the constant fear of losing their home. He told her about finding the ticket, the initial excitement, and then the gut-wrenching realization that it wasn't his to keep. As he spoke, Edna listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. When David finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant as if lost in thought. Finally, she spoke. David, what you've done, it's more than just returning a lost item. You've restored my faith in humanity, and I want to repay that kindness. David shook his head quickly. No, Edna, that's not necessary. I didn't do this for a reward. The ticket is yours, fair and square. Edna held up a hand, silencing him. Let me finish, young man. I want to share the winnings with you. David's jaw dropped. What? No, Edna, I can't accept that. The money is yours. You need it more than I do. Edna chuckled softly. Do I? David, I'm an old woman. I've lived a full life. My needs are simple. This money, it's more than I could ever use. But you have a family to support, dreams to fulfill. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Let me tell you a story, David. When I was a young woman, not much older than you are now, I found myself in a desperate situation. I was alone and scared out of my mind. I had no money, no family to turn to. I thought my life was over. Edna's voice grew soft with memory. But then a stranger showed me kindness. A woman I'd never met before took me in, gave me a place to stay, helped me get back on my feet. She saved my life, and later gave me a chance to fall in love with Harold. And do you know what she said when I tried to repay her? David shook his head, captivated by Edna's story. She said, "Pay it forward." She told me that when I had the chance to help someone else in need, I should take it. That's how we make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. Edna reached out, taking David's hand in her own. "This is my chance to pay it forward, David. Please let me do this. Not just for you, but for me, for Harold, for that woman who helped me all those years ago." David felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Edna, I don't know what to say." Edna smiled, squeezing his hand. "Say yes, David. Let's make this a victory for both of us." After a long moment, David nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Okay, Edna, if you're sure, then yes. Thank you. Thank you so much." Edna's face lit up with joy. "Wonderful. Now let's see about claiming this prize, shall we?" The next few weeks passed in a blur of excitement and paperwork. David and Edna visited the lottery office together, explaining their unique situation. The officials were touched by their story, and soon the process of splitting the winnings was underway. Throughout it all, David was amazed by Edna's generosity and wisdom. She insisted on giving him half of the jackpot, despite his protest that a smaller amount would be more than enough. "You have a family to think of," she'd say with a wink. "And who knows? Maybe one day you'll be in a position to help someone else in need." As the reality of their newfound wealth began to sink in, David and Sarah had many long discussions about how to use the money responsibly. They agreed that they didn't want to change their lives drastically or live extravagantly. Instead, they focused on securing their family's future and giving back to their community. Their first priority was paying off their debts, including the mortgage on their home. The relief of being debt-free was indescribable, like a weight lifted off their shoulders. Next, they set aside money for Emma and Jack's education, ensuring that their children would have opportunities they had only dreamed of. With the immediate financial pressures resolved, David and Sarah turned their attention to their long-term goals. They had always talked about starting a small business, something that would allow them to work together and contribute to their community. Now, with Edna's gift, that dream was within reach. After much discussion and planning, they decided to open a community center in their neighborhood. The center would offer after-school programs for kids, job training for adults, and a safe space for people of all ages to gather and connect. It was their way of paying forward the kindness they had received. As the months passed and their plans took shape, David often found himself thinking back to that fateful night in the park. He thought about how close he had come to keeping the ticket, how easy it would have been to justify that decision. But as he watched his family thrive, as he saw the positive impact their community center was having, he knew he had made the right choice. One sunny afternoon, about a year after finding the ticket, David sat on a bench outside the newly opened community center. He watched as children laughed and played, as adults chatted and shared stories. The sound of hammering came from inside, where volunteers were putting the finishing touches on a new computer lab. A familiar voice pulled him from his thoughts. Well, looks like you've been busy." David looked up to see Frank, the homeless man from the park, standing before him. But Frank looked different now. His clothes were clean, his beard neatly trimmed. There was a spark of life in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Frank," David exclaimed, standing to shake the man's hand. "It's great to see you. You're looking well." Frank chuckled, gesturing to the community center. "Thanks to you and this place. The job training program here, it gave me a second chance. I've got steady work now, even my own little apartment." David felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "That's wonderful, Frank. I'm so glad we could help." Frank's expression grew serious. I've been meaning to tell you something. That day in the park, when you told me about the ticket, I almost told you to keep it. Lord knows you could have used the money, but something told me you needed to make that decision on your own." He paused, his eyes misting slightly. "I'm glad I kept my mouth shut, because what you've done here with this place, it's worth more than any lottery jackpot. You're changing lives, David, including mine." David felt a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, Frank. That means more to me than you know." As Frank walked away, David's gaze fell on a plaque near the entrance of the community center. It read, in honor of Edna Thompson and Harold Thompson. May their kindness continue to ripple through our community." David smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. He thought about Edna, who had become like a grandmother to his children. He thought about Sarah, whose pride and love for him had only grown stronger through this journey. He thought about Emma and Jack, growing up with a strong sense of integrity and compassion. In that moment, David realized that he had gained something far more valuable than money. He had gained a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in life: integrity, kindness, and the bonds of family and community. The lottery ticket had been a test, a crossroads in his life. And by choosing the path of honesty and generosity, he had won something far greater than any jackpot. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the community center, David stood up, ready to head home to his family. He walked away from the bench with a light heart and a clear conscience, knowing that he had made the right decision. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led him to a richer life than he could have ever imagined. And as he walked, David couldn't help but smile, thinking that sometimes the real treasure isn't the one you find. It's the one you create by doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The gentle chime of the doorbell echoed through the Matthews home, a modest but comfortable house nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. David looked up from the newspaper he was reading, a smile spreading across his face. He knew exactly who it was. "I'll get it," Emma's voice rang out as she raced down the stairs, her brother Jack hot on her heels. David chuckled, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. He could hear the excited chatter of his children as they flung open the front door. "Grandma Edna!" they cried in unison, their voices filled with joy. David stood up, making his way to the entryway where Edna Thompson was being enthusiastically hugged by Emma and Jack. Despite the years that had passed, Edna's eyes still sparkled with the same warmth and kindness that had touched David's heart on that fateful day. "Well, hello there, my darlings," Edna said, her voice filled with affection. "My, how you've grown. Emma, you're looking more like your mother every day. And Jack, I swear you shot up another inch since I last saw you." Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Edna, it's so good to see you," she said, embracing the older woman. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." As they made their way to the dining room, David couldn't help but marvel at how much their lives had changed. The house they lived in wasn't extravagant by any means, but it was theirs free and clear. The constant worry about bills and mortgage payments that had once plagued them was now a distant memory. But it wasn't just the financial security that had transformed their lives. It was the sense of purpose, the feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves. The community center they had opened with part of the lottery winnings had become a beacon of hope for many in their town. David and Sarah spent much of their time there, running programs, mentoring young people, and fostering a sense of togetherness that had been sorely lacking before. As they settled around the dining table, the aroma of Sarah's home-cooked meal filling the air, David looked at the faces of his loved ones. Emma and Jack were animatedly telling Edna about their latest school projects, their eyes shining with enthusiasm. Sarah was listening intently, a soft smile playing on her lips. And Edna was beaming, soaking in the love and warmth of the family she had become an integral part of. "So, Edna," David said as they began to eat, "how are things at the senior center? I heard you started a new book club." Edna's face lit up. "Oh, it's wonderful, David. You wouldn't believe the discussions we have. Just last week, we were debating the symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird. I tell you, some of those old-timers have insights that would put college professors to shame." Sarah laughed. "I can imagine. You should bring some of them to the community center sometime. I bet our teenagers would love to hear their perspectives." "That's a marvelous idea," Edna agreed. "It would do both groups a world of good to interact more." As the conversation flowed, touching on everything from Emma's upcoming soccer tournament to Jack's budding interest in robotics, David found himself marveling at the simple joy of it all. This was what truly mattered, he realized, not the money in their bank account or the size of their house, but these moments of connection, of shared laughter and love. After dinner, as Sarah and the kids cleared the table, David and Edna moved to the living room. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight filter through the windows. You know, David, Edna said softly, I often think about that day you showed up at my door with that lottery ticket. I still can't quite believe it sometimes. David smiled, reaching out to pat Edna's hand. Neither can I, if I'm honest. It feels like a lifetime ago. Edna nodded, her eyes distant with memory. I was in such a dark place then, lonely, struggling to make ends meet. I thought winning the lottery would solve all my problems. But you know what? This, she gestured around her, this is worth so much more than any amount of money. I know exactly what you mean, David agreed. When I first found that ticket, all I could think about was how it could fix our financial troubles. I never imagined it would lead to, well, all of this. Edna's eyes twinkled. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? You thought you were just returning a lost ticket, but you ended up gaining a whole new family. David felt a lump form in his throat. We're the lucky ones, Edna. You've brought so much joy into our lives. Emma and Jack adore you, and Sarah and I, well, we can't imagine our family without you. Edna reached out, squeezing David's hand. And I can't imagine my life without all of you. You gave me more than just financial security, David. You gave me a reason to keep going, to keep believing in the goodness of people. As they sat there, the sounds of laughter drifting in from the kitchen, where Sarah was undoubtedly engaged in some silly game with the kids, David felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He thought back to those dark days when he'd been unemployed, desperate, and on the verge of losing everything. You know, Edna, he said thoughtfully, I came so close to keeping that ticket. There were moments when I convinced myself it was the right thing to do, that my family needed the money more than whoever had lost it. Edna nodded understanding. It must have been a terrible temptation. I don't think anyone would have blamed you if you had kept it. David shook his head. Maybe not, but I would have known. And I think it would have eaten away at me, no matter how much good we did with the money. Because it wouldn't have been ours, not really. And that, my dear, Edna said softly, is why you deserved every penny I shared with you. Your integrity, your kindness, that's worth more than any lottery jackpot. Just then, Emma burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. Dad! Grandma Edna! Come quick! Jack, and I found an old photo album in the attic. Come have a look. Edna's eyes widened in surprise. Oh my, I love old photos. Well, let's go see them, shall we? As they made their way upstairs, David couldn't help but smile at the eager chatter of his children, the fond reminiscence in Edna's voice as she prepared to share stories of her past. This, he realized, was the true wealth he had gained. Not just financial security, but a rich tapestry of relationships, of shared experiences and memories. The attic was dusty but warm, illuminated by the soft glow of an old lamp. Jack was carefully turning the pages of a leather-bound album, his small face scrunched in concentration. Sarah sat beside him, an arm around his shoulders, while Emma bounced excitedly on her toes. Look, Grandma, Emma pointed to a faded photograph. That's Mom and Dad. Edna leaned in, her eyes misting over with emotion. Oh my, yes. This looks like their wedding day. David looked so handsome in his uniform, and Sarah looked like a princess. As Edna began to recount the story behind her own wedding, David found himself transported. He could almost see the young Edna and Harold, full of hope and dreams for the future. He thought about the twists and turns of fate that had brought them all to this moment. The loss of his job, the found lottery ticket, the chance encounter that had changed all their lives. Later that night, after Edna had gone home and the kids were tucked into bed, David stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the quiet street. Sarah came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder. Penny for your thoughts? She murmured. David smiled, covering her hands with his own. I was just thinking about how different our lives could have been if I hadn't lost my job, if I hadn't found that ticket, if I had made different choices. Sarah nodded against his shoulder. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. We were on the brink of losing everything. And now we have more than we ever dreamed of, David finished. And I don't just mean the money. He turned to face his wife, taking in the love and understanding in her eyes. You know, there were moments when I doubted myself. when I wondered if I was doing the right thing by looking for the ticket's owner. But seeing our family tonight, seeing how happy the kids are, how much good we've been able to do with the community center, I know it was the right choice." Sarah reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I never doubted you for a second, David. Your integrity, your kindness, that's why I fell in love with you. And it's why I fall in love with you all over again every day." As they stood there, holding each other close, David felt a sense of peace settle over him. He thought about the man he had been before all of this, stressed, desperate, on the verge of making choices he might have regretted for the rest of his life. And he thought about the man he was now, content, purposeful, surrounded by love and community. The next morning, as David walked to the community center, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The streets were quiet in the early morning light, but he could already see signs of life stirring. A jogger here, a shopkeeper there, preparing for the day ahead. As he approached the center, he saw a young man sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. The sight struck a chord in David, reminding him of his own moments of despair not so long ago. "Good morning," David said gently as he drew near. "Are you all right?" The young man looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and weary. "Not really," he admitted. I lost my job last week. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got a baby on the way, bills to pay." David felt a surge of empathy. He sat down next to the young man, his voice warm and understanding. "I've been where you are," he said. "It feels like the end of the world, doesn't it?" The young man nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes at finding someone who understood. How did you get through it?" David smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led him to this moment. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "But I learned that sometimes when you think you've lost everything, you're actually on the brink of gaining something far more valuable." He gestured to the community center behind them. "Why don't you come inside? We have a job training program that might be just what you need. And even if it's not, we've got coffee and people who understand what you're going through. Sometimes that's the best place to start." As they stood up and walked towards the center's doors, David felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was why they had created this place, to offer hope, to build connections, to remind people that they weren't alone. Later that day, as David watched the young man engage enthusiastically with one of their career counselors, he couldn't help but smile. He thought about how close he had come to giving up, how tempted he had been to take the easy way out when he found that lottery ticket. But the real jackpot, he realized, wasn't the money. It was the ability to make a difference, to lift others up, to be part of a community that cared for its own. It was the love of his family, the wisdom of Edna, the friendships he had formed, the sense of purpose that filled his days. As he walked home that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, David felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had almost lost everything, but in the process, he had gained something far more precious, a life rich in love, purpose, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. He thought about the story he would tell his children and grandchildren one day, not just about finding a lottery ticket, but about the power of integrity, the importance of community, and the unexpected ways that life could surprise you if you kept your heart open. As he reached his front door, he could hear the sounds of his family inside. Emma's laughter, Jack's excited chatter, Sarah's warm voice. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he had won the greatest lottery of all. David paused for a moment, his hand on the doorknob, and took a deep breath. He silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him to that park on that fateful night. Then, with a smile on his face and love in his heart, he opened the door and stepped into the warmth of his home, ready to embrace whatever new adventures life had in store for him and his family. If you were inspired by David's story of integrity and the true power of kindness, make sure to subscribe for more tales that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. And before you go, we want to hear from you. If you were in David's shoes, facing that difficult choice, how would you have responded? Share your thoughts with us, and let's continue the conversation about the life-changing impact of even the smallest acts of goodness.